Macmillan, grumpy old Scotsman. How are you all doing, folks? So, let's take a look at another Labour failed policy. I'm not kidding, right? This is how bad things are getting for these guys. It's literally every single day. And I've been keeping an eye on it with Google News, because I've got Google News all set up with all political news for the UK. It is literally every single day something goes wrong for Labour. It's literally every single day, and it's been like that for weeks now. Literally weeks. But one of Labour's major promises when they got into power was to essentially fix the housing crisis. Everyone in the UK has known about the housing crisis for a very long time now. An estimated 1 million new homes, 1 million new homes needs to be built in the UK to stem the problems coming from the housing crisis. There is simply not enough homes and there's too many people. That's what it basically comes down to. Not enough homes and too many people. And one of Labour's big promises, because they're full of it. Well, they're full of excrement, but they're also full of promises that they never seem to actually get right. One of Labour's big promises was to build between 1.3 and 1.5 million new homes before the end of this decade. So we're already in 2025, right? At the end of 2025. We're going into 2026 in a few months' time. So they've basically got 4 years to build 1.5 million homes. Do you honestly think they're going to do it? Well, let's take a look and see, shall we? Government set to miss 1.5 million target. Colour me shocked. House builders warn. House builders have warned the government's budget watchdog that ministers' target of building 1.5 million homes in England by the end of the decade is too optimistic. The Home Builders Federation has written to the Office for Budget Responsibility to say that unless the government does something to boost affordability for first-time buyers and cut taxes, the target will be missed, as first reported in the Times. The letter is a blow to Chancellor Rachel Reeves ahead of next month's budget, given that the surge of new homes is central to the OBR's forecast for economic growth. The government says it will leave no stone unturned to meet the 1.5 million new homes target for England. Now remember, this is for England alone. We're not talking about 1.5 million homes scattered across all 4 countries of the UK. It's for England alone. Now, let's be fair here. This is not just Labour's problem. The problem actually started way back during Tony Blair's second administration. Because what Tony Blair decided to do during his second term in office, and it's amazing how many of today's problems can be trailed back to Tony Blair. It's amazing how many problems he caused. But one of the problems, or one of the laws that he put into place during his second term in office under New Labour, was to give local councils, and more especially homeowner groups within those areas that were deemed to be a good spot to build new homes, more say in planning rights. Now, that alone doesn't sound bad, you know. So a homeowners association, let's say, a homeowners association in Sussex or Suffolk, or one of those nice green areas where there's lots of trees and lots of lovely green belt. A homeowners association pops up and says, we want to build 50 new homes in this area here, which is right next door to this relatively new area here, but there's going to be a little gap in there. We're going to put infrastructure in, there's going to be new shops, there's going to be better roads, and it's going to look brilliant, and there's going to be nice fresh build houses for new families to move into, to get onto the housing market. Now, this is the new area here. This is the older new area here. Now, this older new area here was built probably 20 years ago. Right? This new area here is going to be right next door. The old area here are full of NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. Let's take a look at another article which came out a couple of years ago, 2023, but this still tracks back to today. NIMBYs leave house builders waiting up to a year for planning permission. A surge in NIMBYism means local house builders are waiting a year for planning permission, a new report warns. Enormous house price growth over the past 3 decades has driven a boom in animosity against new developments that has prolonged the planning process, destroying the business models of smaller builders. Between the 1990s and 2023, the wait time for planning permission for small and medium-sized housing developments has quadrupled from 14 weeks to a year, according to analysis by Litchfields, a planning consultancy. And it's not just the case of that happening in 2023. There has been numerous cases all the way up to the beginning of this year where local housing authorities, the councils themselves, or housing associations within those councils have tried to start a new building development at the edge of a green belt next to a 15 or 20-year-old housing development, and all of a sudden the NIMBYs come out with their little placards. Don't build here. Think of all the bunny rabbits that you'll kill. Oh yeah, I know my son's waiting for a house, but I don't want houses built in my backyard. Build it over there. Let them deal with it. And this has been going on and on and on. Now, to his credit, Rishi Sunak, in his first year as Prime Minister, decided to lax off the rules about building on the outer skirts of Greenbelt designated land, which basically freed up a lot of the planning permission and a lot of the housing developers to actually start building at the edges or the very edge of actual Greenbelt land. But the problem is, surrounding those greenbelt areas, there is usually housing developments that were built in the 80s, the 90s or the zeros. And those housing developments are all full of NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. And what happens with all the not in my backyard people is, again, due to Tony Blair's second term in office, all these housing association tenants and all the council tenants who are living on the edge of the greenbelt, looking into the greenbelt, who don't want houses spoiling their view of the greenbelt, can now lodge formal protests. And when they lodge a formal protest, the planning development cycle of a new housing development is instantly stalled. Instantly stalled. And what happens then is the housing developers, the housing planners, the local council, the NIMBYs and all of that lot have to sit around a table and hammer out a new deal. And the reason that happened is, again, because of Tony Blair. Because Tony Blair gave the nod, basically, for NIMBYs. They weren't called NIMBYs back then, but, you know, tenant associations, essentially, to be involved in the planning for housing developments that they feel wouldn't suit their area. So now we're at the point here, right, where we've got a housing developer who wants to build 50 affordable new homes or 100 affordable new homes with infrastructure in place, with shopping, all the roads done, all that stuff is already booked into the planning. It's a whole new housing area. But now, the NIMBYs pop up and go, we don't like that road there. No, we want that road moved over there. We don't like that row of houses there. We want that row of houses moved over there. And then the people living over there suddenly pop up and go, oh no, we don't want that row of houses over there. We want that row of houses over there. And then the people living over there pop up and go, oh no, you can't move that row of houses over here. You know where I'm going with this. And the NIMBYs essentially bog up the entire planning process for any new house builds that are going on by saying, we don't like this, or we don't like that, or we don't like the way that's placed. Don't place it there, place it over there. And because the whole plan has to be changed, it's an ongoing continuous cycle. Here's the interesting part. It's not impossible for Britain to build 1.5 million homes in the space of 4 or 5 years. Anyone who's still got living grandparents who remember the Second World War, or anyone who's got older parents who are in their 70s or 80s, who grew up during the late 1940s and were possibly in their early teens during the middle of the 1950s to the early 1960s, asked them about new housing. It was estimated, now there was no actual written proof, but it was estimated that across the country, from Scotland down to England and into Wales, and for that matter parts of Northern Ireland as well, an estimated 5.8 million council homes were built across the country. And that was mostly down to the Labour Party that came into power in 1945 and then were voted out in 1950, and then the Conservatives under Winston Churchill came into power in 1950 for Churchill's last term as Prime Minister before he eventually retired, and Churchill decided, you know what, Labour's idea's a good one, we'll go on with it. And that's what happened all the way through the 1950s. All the way through the end of the 1950s, going into the first 4 years of the 1960s, there was a massive house building project. And this is when the council house system first began to pop up, because it was Labour's idea at that point in time, after the decimation of the Second World War, to build just under 2 million homes as their term began. And they did. They did. New homes were built across London, across Coventry, which were decimated in the Second World War, but not just London and Coventry, across the entirety of England. When Churchill came into power in 1950/1951, he extended the whole house building programme to cover the whole of the UK. The whole of the UK. Which is why when you come up here to Scotland, the bulk of rentable housing, unlike England, but the bulk of rentable housing in Scotland is still council-owned flats or council-owned homes. A lot of the housing stock down south in England got sold off during Margaret Thatcher's time as Prime Minister, and some of the older housing stock was simply demolished and they weren't replaced. Up here in Scotland, we went down a different road. We've still got a lot of areas that have got the old 4-in-a-block tenement buildings, where you've got a big huge house with 2 flats downstairs and 2 flats upstairs, so 4 families can move into the one building. I grew up in one of those 4-in-a-block tenements that got knocked down in 2013, 2014, and that's when we moved into this house that we're in right now, which is a new housing development that was built on top of an already demolished 4-in-a-block tenement scheme. But there is vast sections of Irvine, where I'm living right now, that still have the 4-in-a-block tenements in place. They're simply updated with new windows, new doors, the roofs are redone every decade or so to make sure the insulation's well. Up here in Scotland, we took care of the council homes, which is why a lot of them are still standing. Down south in England, it was a different kettle of fish, though. A lot of the councils down south in England decided to stop funding the repair work on a lot of the older 4-in-a-block tenements that you see down south, and they were simply demolished. But in a lot of cases, the demolishing was not followed up by a rebuild phase. It was up here, though. The housing crisis mainly affects England. It mainly affects England, with the growing population going on, whether it be from families having kids or whether it be from immigration, whether it be legal immigration or whether it be illegal immigration. The fact of the matter is there's not enough homes in England. And it's been that way for about 15 to 20 years now. But it's not as if successive governments, whether it be Labour who's in power now or whether it be the Tories with their 14 years of rule, it's not as if successive governments since Tony Blair's time have not tried to build new homes. They have. But unfortunately, Tony Blair put in a set of laws in his second term which has made planning and planning permission extremely difficult for house builders in the UK in the 21st century, because all of a sudden all the NIMBYs show up. Usually they're older couples, let's face it, they're usually older couples in their 60s or 70s that love the view of the trees in their back door and go, oh no, we don't want houses to spoil our view of our lovely green fields and cows and sheep and crap like that. Oh no, you can't build there. No building here. Build it over there. And the whole cycle just repeats and repeats and repeats. But here's the thing. Labour could easily learn a lesson from the old Labour Party of 1946. Because what did that Labour Party do back then? Screw it. We're just going to build there. And we're going to build there and there and there and there. And if anyone doesn't like it, tough. That's exactly what Labour did in 1946 when they started the house building programme. And when Winston Churchill took power back from Labour in the 1950 and 1951 election, he said the exact same thing. We're going to build here, we're going to build here, we're going to build there, we're going to build there. Exactly where the houses needed to go. It's not random building on any bit of green land. It was exactly where the houses needed to go. Either within the city boundaries themselves or spillover areas outside of big cities to take the pressure off of the growing city population. We're going to build there, there and there, and if you don't like it, tough. That's what the Labour Party need to do right now. If they want to reach this target, and if they put their mind to it, they could possibly build 1.3 to 1.5 million homes within the next 4 years, because the old Labour Party done it back in 1946 to 1950. They managed just over 1.2 million homes. And we need to remember, house building back then was completely different to house building now. Because a lot of the house building that's done now, the roof essentially comes in kits. It's lorried in. They come in kits. Very easy to put a roof up now. And the house building to do with the actual bricklaying and stuff, very simple. Back then, in the 40s, the 50s, the early 60s, far, far longer to build a house. Far longer to build a house back then. But look at how many houses were actually built during that decade of the 50s and the first 3 years of the 1960s. And many of those houses are still standing to this day. Millions of them. Millions of them. And the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, following that Labour Party after the Second World War, just decided, we're going to start building. And if you don't like where we're building it, tough. We don't care. Labour could technically do that, because here's the thing, Rishi Sunak, for all the problems that Sunak had, took the thumbscrews off of the heavy legislation that Tony Blair screwed down during his second term in office. Rishi Sunak loosened off those thumbscrews. Labour can legally build on Greenbelt now without protest. It's in the law. Because Rishi Sunak put it in there. Labour can legally build anywhere they damn well want to, and they don't have to listen to the NIMBYs. But the problem with the current Labour Party is they're so far left, in line with the NIMBY mentality, that the minute the NIMBYs pop up and start protesting, oh, we better not build there, we better choose somewhere else. Which is why Labour are never going to get their 1.5 million homes built. They're just simply not going to manage it. They're not going to manage it. They've got 4 years left. 4 years left for this plan to actually take place. And out of the, I think it was something, the last bit was something like just under 37 or 38 new housing areas that were published by the government as a joint venture between either housing associations or actual fresh builders like, I don't know, like, house building companies essentially. Out of those 37 or 38, only two have actually gone ahead. The rest were either scrapped, put on hold, or are stuck in planning permission hell. And the reason most of those went down that road? The NIMBY groups. Not in my backyard. Labour could just turn round to them and say, tough, because that's what Labour did back in the 40s. And because of that, millions of new houses were built. Millions of them were built. But the Labour Party now is basically too scared to do it. So they uproot their plans, pop over to a new greenbelt area, pop down a new plan, and then those NIMBYs in that new area start the protest and wave their placards. It's a never-ending cycle. Never-ending cycle. But the thing is, it doesn't need to be this way. Doesn't need to be. Labour could simply put their foot down and tell them all to go themselves. But they don't. They don't. And this is why we're not going to get new houses. Simply, we're just not going to get new houses. This housing problem is going to keep rolling on and rolling on and rolling on until a Prime Minister comes into power who will take what Rishi Sunak started and run with it. And it's not going to be a Labour government that's going to do that. It's not. It's simply not. It's either going to have to be a Conservative government or Reform UK. One of those two, who will basically pick up what Sunak started and run with it, and just pick and choose where these housing places need to be, where they need to be, where there is an actual need for housing, and simply start building. If the NIMBYs start up, tell them all to go for themselves. Yeah, just tell them where to go. Don't like it, move somewhere else. Simple as that. And the best thing about it is, a lot of these NIMBYs, a lot of them, they've got sons. They've got daughters who have a young family. And those sons and those daughters with the young family are simply unable to get their foot on the first rung of the housing ladder, because right now in England there is a massive housing shortage. And because there's a massive housing shortage, house prices are extremely expensive. Extremely expensive. If there was 1.3 to 1.5 million fresh build homes built in the UK, with about a quarter of them given over to social housing for local councils, and 3/4 of them given over to a mixture between private sales or housing association rentals, just that little chunk of those 1.3 to 1.5 million homes alone, let's say 30 to 35%. 30 to 35% of those 1.3 to 1.5 million homes given over to actually outright buying the house. Housing prices would immediately start to fall. Immediately start to fall. The parents of those kids who have a young family, who can no longer afford to buy a house, the parents of those families know this. They know that England needs more homes to bring down housing prices, but not in my backyard. Oh no, build it over there. Don't build it here. No. Yeah, the UK needs a Prime Minister that would basically tell them all to go F themselves. That's what would basically need to happen, much like what happened at the end of the 1940s going into the 50s. That's what needs to happen. Anyway, that's it from me, folks. Have a good one.